Hello and welcome to this webinar. My name is Tim Burnett. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to be talking about leadership in the AI transformation of assessment, and we're going to be looking at strategies for success, innovation and growth. And I'm joined by an amazing panel here, which I'll introduce in a second. So just a reminder for the test, you don't know the Test Community Network. This is a network it's a marketplace for podcasts, it's content, it's for events. What I'm trying to do is bridge together as much of the diverse assessment community we have globally together into one place so that you can kind of enrich and grow your knowledge base. Every week I do a weekly update, and in addition to this week's webinar, next week we're going to be having an update from Krista from the Asia ATP. I'm going to share a very quick clip for you now so you can get yourself signed up and registered so you don't miss this.
Add to that, what's really interesting is with the pandemic, we saw a lot of governments and organizations really go digital. And then once the pandemic kind of ended, some pulled back from that. We expected,
Right.
just to keep going forward into the future, but some have pulled back. And again, I think they're really concerned about, especially with proxy testing and things like that, making sure that people are, test security and all of these things. But it's definitely something that we address at the conference as well. And the experts are there to talk about how you can still go digital and remain safe and continue on that momentum that happened during the pandemic.
So if you want to hear more about that conversation with Krista, then please do join me next week on the weekly update. For this webinar, let's start off today. We've got Steve Connolly, EdTech Strategist and Director of Education Technology at AQA. We have Adarsh Sudhindra from Technologist, Innovator and Entrepreneur and Vice President of Growth and Strategy at Excelsoft. And then we have Graham Hudson, Special Advisor to the Assessment Professionals, Consultant and Chair of the eAssessment Association, which I'm also a board member as well. So welcome to you all. Is everyone well?
All good.
Tim, good to see
all
you.
Good.
Hi, Tim. Hello, everybody.
All excited to be here. As we go through here, if you've got any questions you want to ask as we do this webinar, then there should be a chat panel available to you. So add your questions in there. We will try and cover it. I've got quite a lot of questions for you all today. So I'm going to get started, and we're going to try and finish on the button quarter to the on the hour, because Graham has to dash definitely. Then we don't want to see him run off and see him wearing his shorts with his shirt and tie. But we're going to go first, Steve. So, Steve, drawing on your expertise in using technology for EdTech and assessment, what are some of the most promising applications you've seen so far of AI in the assessment space?
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be here. There are several strands which won't be a surprise to quite a lot of colleagues who are on the call, but I think probably like everyone, we're exploring the potential for AI, and we're seeing variable results. So I think, there's a hierarchy to safe and effective use of AI in the assessment world. And the way I would look at this is there's the kind of generative part, there's the assistive marking part and the quality assurance, and then there's the learner experience, so personalization, feedback, links to content, which we can come on to later on as part of the panel. The key areas that we've been investigating and I've seen have been largely around quality assurance, so assistive methodologies to quality assure content that is produced. Item banking is a really good example of where you're looking for high quality items across the piece and looking for errant items that you can remove. And the other thing is distractor generation. That's traditionally been a bit of an overhead where you've had closed question types, and we're seeing a proliferation of those. Assistive marking is really interesting because I think we should look at both ends of assessment. It's not just about the creation of assessment; it's what comes out of it and what we do with it. And I've often thought that assessment is actually a data. It's a data-driven industry rather than a questions-driven. Obviously, really good questions drive really good data, but ultimately we're interested in what the outcome looks like, whether that's in the formative or the high-stakes space. So the potential for assistive marking for both examiners and teachers, notably, I think the latter really importantly, and it was interesting being at the Education World Forum a couple of weeks ago, and one of the two key themes came out across all international territories: teacher retention because of workload and quality of life, and AI and what do we do about it. And it struck me that assistive marking within assessment is a really potential a game changer. It's just how accurate and how well executed can that be. Item generation in the formative space, we're looking at how we can seed AI to generate items, and there's an interesting set of tools that are coming out from a lot of providers where people aren't just using the open LLMs. It's also about how you use your own proprietary content to generate really good quality assessment items. So that's starting to emerge as a really big theme, and that is a big overhead, obviously, for people to do. I'll come back to that later, because quality assurance in relation to what it produces is another issue. Feedback for students in the formative space. We're seeing the cusp of personalised learning. We've talked about it for a very long time. I would argue we haven't really touched the surface of personalised learning, because it's quite an overhead to trying to work through the needs of every single learner, but AI has the real potential to drive that. Adaptivity in the personalised learning space. I think we have to be careful in the distinction between what AI brings to that and what algorithms essentially bring to it. But AI certainly as a layer can play a part in it, and also the training of large language models. I think that over time, you'll see more and more secure proprietary models being built for very specific purposes. So that is another area that we're investigating as well. And off the back of that, then you can produce some very high quality, sort of high stakes assessment items, but also do some really interesting things in the formative assessment space. So in broad terms, those are the themes we've been looking at.
Yeah. So there's a lot there, isn't there? That's and it's quite a broad spectrum of items, and I think, Graham, kind of leading on to looking at this, with an organisation looking at any of these ideas, if you're preparing to use these kind of AI in assessment, what would be your primary consideration? Because you're not necessarily an AI expert, but you're someone who's led in a lot of business transformation and technology transformation. What kind of things should people be thinking about when they're taking this kind of thing on board?
It's a great question, actually, and as you say, I've done quite a lot of education transformation and large projects, and time critical, in many cases, many time critical large scale exercises, and I think they all have a similar pattern in a way, and probably I'd give this answer irrespective of the content or the context, if you like. So I'm a great believer in reading the business gurus. So you all know that Stephen Covey quote, "Start with the end in mind." And I think that's true here. What's the outcome that you want to achieve? Why are you doing this exercise? And what are the benefits that you want to derive from it? And just being clear about that at the start. And some of the things that Steve was talking about there are clearly going to be benefits that you want. But, are you doing it just for that? Or do you have a real goal and vision in mind? So I think you've got to be clear about that. And then make sure that, in my experience, if you don't get everybody signed up to the direction of travel, you're just going to be in trouble, because somewhere along the line, somebody's going to trip over, and then you're going to find that the progress that you wanted to make isn't going as fast as you wanted, or somebody throws a bomb in from the side and slows you down. So, is everybody signed up? And when I talk to people about making change, I say, is your leader, your CEO, your board signed up to this? And I like them to get a written statement from the CEO that says, effectively, I, the CEO, am backing this, and make them say it, because, if it perhaps doesn't go quite as you want, there's a bit of wiggle room there if you're not careful. And any sensible organization is then going to say, what's the business case? I'm going to invest in this exercise. What's the return I'm going to get? What type of return is it that I want to actually achieve? So that may sound boring, and you may just want to sort of get on with it. But it's really important to understand that, because you can track benefits later on, and tracking benefits then starts to prove your case. And then just a couple of other points, dedicate people to the task. Don't think you can do it with your existing people. You've got to dedicate, whatever it is, they've got to be focused on it. And then just ask yourself the question, what am I prepared to lose? If this doesn't work, what's going to happen? Am I prepared to lose X, Y, Z, money or whatever? And do you have a plan B? So, those are the things that I think I just bring in terms of experience of making change of this sort.
Okay, no, that's really good. So I think it's quite grand. I'm a bit more of a kind of let's just go for it and try it. And I think you do need to have a bit of that energy in the organization, but I appreciate, this is sensible stuff, so I wouldn't necessarily go live straight with one of my wildcat ideas. Adarsh, let's bring you into the conversation then. So as an entrepreneur and innovator, you're working on innovation ideas in AI and many different educational-based projects. How much impact is AI currently having on the initiatives that you've been working on? What's been your kind of experience so far?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's great to be here. So now I'll talk about it from two different perspectives: the market and the technology and the implementation side of it. One thing that has changed in the last 12 months is 12 to 18 months is that people are a lot more aware of the applications of AI. So now all of us here would know this, but most conferences that we have been attending in the learning and assessment space in the last 12 months, more than 50% of the sessions are on AI and the possible applications of AI in the learning and assessment space. So that has resulted in people becoming more aware of the possibilities and are very excited about these possibilities. So every prospect, every customer that we meet today are keen in on bringing in AI into their learning and assessment practices in their own organization. So AI is no longer a prototype or more of an experiment. We have started seeing production deployments of AI applications live, being used by real users, real test takers. Some examples I can think on the top of my head. Informative assessments and learning. We have applications in AI that can play the important role of improving the overall experience of users through personalization, through adaptive learning that Steve mentioned. AI can be effectively used during the item authoring and test construction process. It's being used to improve the overall test taking process. Improve the experience for the candidates and the test takers. In remote proctoring, we all know AI can reduce costs while maintaining decent levels of integrity and security. And then AI can also enable better reporting, effective evaluation of subjective responses, of programmatic responses, of spoken responses. Now, the market is aware, the market is willing to invest in AI, and they're keen to invest in AI. From an implementation, from a technology point of view, just 5-6 years ago, if you wanted to achieve some of these solutions, you needed expensive hardware, complex AI machine learning models. Now these are just an API call away, thanks to the cloud and the democratization of the knowledge and power of AI. So very interesting times ahead, and we are looking forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. And we've got a question. I'm just going to show it up from Sam. Now, so when using AI to generate items or resources for assessments, there is clear guidance on the output that needs to be changed by a human to be able to be able to copyright the content. This is an ongoing conversation that's gone on quite frequently, isn't it? Kind of using generative and the impact on that. And I think there's two camps on this. One is forget the copyright, just generate, and just use that as a means of kind of dealing with security. But that obviously doesn't deal with anyone who really does want to copyright their content. I don't know if any of the panel have got a guidance on this. I think it's maybe a slightly more legal question. Anyone? Steve, you got a thought?
Well, I was at ATP, which I think Adarsh will relate to in the States, and this being the States, it was a question that came up fairly early on in all of the all of the seminars around what is it legal to use and what is it illegal to use. The fact is that there are a couple of cases in publishing, related to publishing as opposed to assessment, where this has cropped up, where works have been scraped off the internet and have ended up in LLMs and been utilized. And there's one academic, I think, who was taking someone to court over the use of their proprietary copyright in relation to use of AI. The answer is it hasn't really been tested in law, I think, is the reality. And the degree to which you can, given the size of the open large language models that there are, when you're generating items using kind of the open models as opposed to your own ones, caution is probably advisory. And I would say, aside from the issue of how much human intervention is required to turn it from something that wasn't your copyright into something that is, I think quality assurance would be my #1 priority. Just because it's able to churn this stuff out, does it actually meet your criteria? And I think Graham's actually the takeaway for everyone on this call for me would be, what are you actually trying to solve? So if you're trying to produce a lot of questions very quickly, then fine, but you're still going to have to QA them to a certain extent. And I think in the QAing process, it comes back to whether your subject matter experts are better off writing those things from scratch, or whether just adapting them and making them fit for purpose for your needs and for your audience's needs is sufficient, not only to give you quality assurance, but also the unique items you're looking for. But the reality is, I don't think anyone has yet, unless I'm unaware of it, actually tested this principle. It's a good question, though.
No, and there's a case going, isn't there? OpenAI being sued by New York Post, I think it is, or something, because a lot of the data was scraped on there. There's talk. Nobody's actually opening up as to where the data's come from. I think YouTube's been scraped for a lot of the Google, Sora stuff, etc. Yeah, there's lots going on out there. Okay, so Graham, I want to just pick your brains a little bit more about this kind of transformation process. So as someone who's led organizations through major technology-based transformations, what are the most critical lessons you've learned about managing change and ensuring a smooth transition? You've touched on a few bits, but is there anything any kind of key examples?
Thanks. And I was going to say everything that I said before. And I just on the get everybody signed up. I was involved 10 years ago in a procurement that had a total value of £280 million. And the day before the bid was due to be submitted, it was pulled by the lead supplier because the main board had not been lined up. The person who was running that bid was no longer with the business fairly soon after. So, this sort of thing is quite important. But just a couple of other points. Get the best people you can, I think. I'm a great believer in, I don't need to know everything, but if I have people around me who do know it, then I'm going to use those people. So do that. And if you feel that you haven't quite got the right person, then wait until you can get them, because I have appointed people because I was a bit desperate and then lived to regret it. So, best people, find them, make sure you do get them. Get a clear program sorted. Now, I mean, you've said, Tim, you like sort of get stuck in, but actually, if you're going to be successful with this, you have to structure it in a way that says, this is what I want to achieve. These are all the elements I want to achieve. These are benefits I want to realize from it. And then you can demonstrate your progress and ultimately to your organization, your return on investment. And then my son was a Scrum Master for a number of years with Sky, and I think you start taking lessons from that approach to development. Take them in steps and be ready to adjust course, because a program takes you from here to here, but doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what the path is that you're going to follow. You might chart that path, but actually you might take that path in the end. So be prepared to change direction, and don't see changing direction as a problem. Welcome it in that respect. And I have a rule of thumb. It's like the DIY I do at home. Everything takes twice as long as I thought it was going to be. So that applies to timeline, and it also applies to cost in my experience as well. Or maybe more than twice than you thought it was going to be. And don't let business as usual take you over. So be careful to keep that under control and keep it separated. And then I spent a year being a product management director, which was the worst job in the world, because on the one hand you had developers that you wanted to feed work to, and on the other hand you had salespeople who were wanting stuff that you didn't have. And I was always saying, please don't sell the vapor, because we don't have it. So please don't sell it. So, you had to keep people under control. And the last thing I would say, remember the program comes first, always. So if you're never sure what to do, what is your main priority? That's what I'd say. So I don't know what that's of any help.
No, that's good. I compared myself to Maverick from Top Gun the other week in a meeting. My wife was present in the room. She said, "Just remember, you're not Maverick. It's a fictional character. Don't think, do is not a motto to follow." So, so taking that forward, Steve, how can what Graham said there? How could you apply those kind of lessons to AI implementation? And how is it different from kind of other technical based innovations?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack in all of that, but I would echo what Graham says. You have to run it almost alongside as an adjunct to your business as usual. But again, I come back to his key point from the opening statement, which is have in mind some key outcomes that you want to achieve, because I think it's a lot easier to get buy-in and transformation if you have a clear objective ahead of you. So I'm actually very keen on trying to think about what the best use of AI is at the lowest risk but the highest benefit. That's and I know it's an obvious thing to say, but sometimes we get really kind of I think wound up about the potential for AI without thinking what are all the challenges around it. I'll come on to the challenges in a minute. And funnily enough, there are some fairly simple but quite key problems or challenges, I would say, that have a human overhead to them that we can solve. We already have solved within my organization now, and I'm observing other people doing, which are business critical. They're not very sexy, but they are really good implementations. I mean, even if you take something like co-pilots in helplines, those types of things, the bread and butter of supporting your customers, it's now becoming a really well-established technology. And then you can go to the other extreme of talking about really large language models doing all sorts of amazing stuff in personalized learning and assessment and remediation and content and all the rest of it, which, in principle sound brilliant, but are probably more prone to variability, to ethical issues, to the point that Sam raised, about copyright and all of those types of things. And they're more prone to problems. So you want to be investigating those things whilst also going for the low-hanging fruit that's going to have a really beneficial impact. And I think once you start to prove those smaller things, then it starts to build confidence. It's like if you think about all the technologies we've talked about in education specifically, if we're talking about assessment, then there's a lot of noise around those things until they become ubiquitous and settled and embedded. Yeah. And before you know it, people are using them without even thinking about using them. The biggest challenge I can see is there's so much outside of your control in the way AI is evolving. How do you keep tabs on that? How do you, as an organization, make sure that you are on top of the changing models that sit behind it, the improved, in inverted commas, versions that come out that then give you variability in what you're seeing coming out of the endeavors that you've undertaken as a business? And I think this is actually a really big challenge. So some of these closed language models that you can build yourself to train things, so you've got an actual fixed point of reference. But even then, some of the versions of AI tools are introducing new challenges because you're not seeing consistent results. I think the other thing is have some ethical frameworks around all of this as well. We talk about ethical use of AI. I think in education that is so important. I mean, it's obviously important in many areas, but where you're talking about the education of students and you're talking about support for teachers, having some really clearly defined ethical frameworks that you can test your application against, I think is critical. And the last bit I would talk about is scalability, specifically in relation to assessment. Something you build for science education. Is if you're talking about things like assistive marking and feedback to students, is that applicable to other subject areas, other areas of the curriculum? Is it a scalable model, or is it something you've got to retrain every time you build it out? And I think that's something for me is of a concern, because there's a big overhead to that. So know what the boundaries and limitations are. Can you go for the things that will be ubiquitous as opposed to very specific? And I think that's something that we're going to continue to investigate. That's a real area of focus for me at the moment.
Yeah, I think one particular point, your ethical, having an understanding of your ethics and your position there is essential. I suppose what is acceptable to you as part of your process and your organisation. Some will have a little bit more of a wider berth than others, but one part of this process is going to be trying to kind of foster a culture of innovation. And to you, Adarsh, from your perspective as an entrepreneur, how can organizations foster a culture of innovation to ensure that everyone is involved in the transformation process? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we went through this transformation very recently at Excelsoft. In fact, I should say we are still going through this. I can definitely share my experience here. So, first of all, this initiative should be top down. We should start with the leadership of the organization, setting a clear AI vision aligned with the goals of the organization. And it's very important that this initiative gets support with executive sponsorship. It cannot be a handful of AI enthusiasts driving this in silos across the organization. Right? We have seen such initiatives tend to die down quickly without making any significant impact. In fact, we should have AI champions at various levels in the organization, right from the top management down to the individual contributors. For this to be sustainable and to make an impact. The second thing I would say is that it's very important to have a transparent communication channel across the organization about the AI projects, regular updates, gathering feedback from across the organization, addressing concerns, if any. Essentially, we have to make it inclusive, right? So these are crucial for building trust. You cannot go about building something in the dark and in stealth mode, and then one fine day, release it, in the face of everyone. People are not going to trust or accept things that they do not understand. So transparency in communication and openness is very important, especially when you're doing something transformative, like bringing in AI across your organization. The third thing is about upskilling. Upskilling is very important. Education and training programs to enhance the overall AI literacy of the organization. Providing the right infrastructure and tools, creating an inclusive, innovative environment for everyone, is key. That is when everybody in the organization will be able to appreciate the value that AI can bring onto the table. And finally, reiterating what Steve mentioned, ethical considerations play a vital role in your AI strategy. Right? You will find a lot of people, both internally and in your customer organizations, who have concerns about the ethical considerations of AI. So it's very important to develop and set up an organization-wide AI framework around governance and ethics. Right? There are several frameworks out there, standard ones. You could adopt them or build on top of them or build something from scratch. This generally would ensure responsible use of AI and would foster trust and accountability internally as well as externally.
Okay, so we're saying then that obviously you need to encourage teams, keep transparency going within those teams, have a framework that you're working towards, and make sure people can speak openly throughout the process as kind of the transformation. Any other thoughts that anyone else wants to add in there, just in terms of that kind of fostering? Then I think we've got quite a few questions to go through in the comments. Then we'll just nip into those. Anything else in terms of fostering that innovation? No, it's okay. We can go to the kind of questions if you want. Okay, so John's first question. So handwritten paper essays converted to digital text. How reliable is that, and can Gen AI help with that? I suppose that's a piece of technology that's been going on for a while, really. And I suppose what John's digging at is, can the use of generative AI, the new systems, new learning models, really add any kind of additional spin to that? Has anyone got any kind of thoughts on how we can change that process?
I mean, I can take that. So
Yeah.
you don't need AI specifically to turn handwritten responses into digital responses. OCR has been optical character recognition has been around for quite long. So that does the job of digitizing the response. Where AI can play a role is to take that digital or digitized text and analyze it. For example, essay evaluation. LLMs can be used for essay evaluation. So you're essentially giving the students response, free text response, and a rubric to the large language model and asking it to grade the student's response based on this rubric.
Yeah.
Right. So large language models are very accurate and the evaluation that comes back from these LLMs are after evaluation by 2 or 3 human evaluators seems to be acceptable. So Gen AI in itself need not be used to digitize handwritten responses, but it can be used for evaluation and further processing of the student responses.
I'll add to that. You're right. Absolutely. That is a technology for conversion. Where AI does come in, I mean, OCR is being enhanced with AI to ensure that the errors are not introduced when that conversion takes place, because it will check for sense and meaning. One of the things I'm interested in at the moment is if we go through and fastidiously produce digitized or digital text versions of handwritten scripts. In other words, we pay someone to do it and we run it through an OCR system. Is there any variability between those two? And if there is variability, what impact does that then have on assistive marking and feedback? Because if the variability is enough between the original handwritten response and the digitized version that is then analyzed, then that adds in a whole layer of complication. I come back to, how scalable are these models and how reliable are these models? And what you don't want to be doing even in the kind of formative space is misleading students or teachers because of some form of conversion. I mean, in the formative space, funnily enough, schools have been, and educationalists around the world have been using digital input for years. On-screen homework is not an alien concept in a lot of places. It is in some. The big issue comes from the way our exams work in the UK, certainly, and in a lot of jurisdictions where they're captured on paper and then digitised for the purposes of marking. So there you've got handwritten scripts. So it's not an easy one to overcome. But I think further studies needed, and OCR has improved enormously. So the work continues, but it's a good question.
Yeah, I think John just adds to that, saying he's not really found an OCR system that's been reliable enough so far, but it's probably worth connecting with you if there's something out there. One other thing, looking at AI's different perspectives, so this I suppose the cheating angle. Can the panel recommend any AI detection tools? Basically, my kind of view on this so far is no. There are. I don't think there are. I don't know the panel would disagree with me on that one.
Well, I've tried them actually. I've tried modifying work to improve it, and then putting it through an AI detector, and it says 99% sure this is absolutely AI. Then I've stuck it in another tool, and it said absolutely fine. It's not AI. Yeah. Or I've changed a word, or I've misspelled something. I found that misspelling actually tends to kick it out into the AI detection category. So I've only played with just what I found on the internet, but I'm not entirely sure that any of them you could say are going to detect it.
I think there are a couple of them that are reasonably accurate. Now, Quillbot and CopyLeaks are two of them that I regularly use. So, when one of those employees has been, very poor in his, writing his email, suddenly you see a very well written email, that is ChatGPT writing the email for him. So, I've immediately tried Quillbot and CopyLeaks, and it reasonably, with reasonable accuracy, detects AI generated content. Like Graham said, if you tweak it and fine tune it, now it loses accuracy. But if it is purely AI generated, then most of the times these tools have been able to detect that with high probability that it is AI generated.
Yeah. Another question coming from Graham Clark here. So what examples are valid examples that are organizations proactively encouraging learners to use AI in assessment whilst building integrity through transparency? Steve, have you got any kind of examples there that you could?
Well, there's some noticeable schools who, in the private sector as well as the public sector, where they've got pretty motivated learners, and actually they decided to encourage the use of AI as the flipped learning model, where you go away with a a question or a project and you use AI, but you're encouraged to actually tweak that response, that material into something that you bring back in, and then you critique. It's the flipped learning model where you do the learning outside, you come back and you talk about how you would improve that response. I haven't seen. I've seen some commercial tools that are doing this. It takes quite a brave educationalist at the moment to say we're going to embrace the use of AI for the purposes of actually generating content. And then what we're going to do is encourage students to critique that work and improve on it. And you do need motivated learners, in my view. I mean, a lot of students are using this as the basis for trying to generate initial responses to project work or essay work that they've got to hand in. I mean, actually, ironically, all of this sort of strengthens the arguments for secure exams, where you do not have AI available to you at the point of answering the question. And I'm not saying that that is a right or wrong thing within high stakes assessment. Personally, I think that if you can use AI to frame your responses to questions and you can use it to as a starting point, you can democratize learning for a lot of students who would otherwise be suffering through lack of having access to a teacher or access to private tuition or indeed even resources. So it's immature at the moment is what I would say. I think the other thing is we are in a world of high stakes exams in this country. So certainly in the UK, teachers are very mindful of that. So they want students to prove that they have actually generated that work. So they're not misled into thinking when that student goes into the exam, they're going to come out with, I don't know, a 7 and they come out with a 4, because actually they've been generating those answers to questions all the way through. So it's not really a very clear answer, but there are some examples of it happening out there.
Okay.
I mean, my observation, I guess, is two things. I'd say I'm not entirely sure it applies to learning per se, but I was doing some work on critical thinking with MBA students in Exeter, and we set them some tasks on analysis of sustainability goals, and they went on creating their answers, and none of them used ChatGPT at all. It wasn't immediately in their mind. It was not a first port of call for them, And actually, we said when we done that. And the other thing that we did, we gave them access to personal experts through Zoom calls. So we ran Zoom calls during this session, and we zoomed in a couple of world experts, and they could ask them questions, but they didn't ask ChatGPT questions. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is just in my own experience in some of the work that I do, I've used ChatGPT just to help me frame what I'm doing. And in one piece of work, I gave it to the client and I said, look, I've generated this table using ChatGPT. Now, I can't validate that. I'm telling you what I've done, but actually this forms the basis of quite an interesting piece of further research that can be done that I wouldn't necessarily have thought of if I hadn't actually framed it in that way. But I think it's a question of attributing it as much as anything else.
Okay, I'll kind of go through the questions a little bit more, and we'll go back to the comments from the audience. So, Adarsh, as an entrepreneur in the EdTech space, how can assessment organisations test the water without putting their brand at risk? So, what can they do to kind of, you think, that just to kind of experience things a little bit? We've talked about having a kind of a clear goal at the end, but are there any ways in which they can kind of sample?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I'm sure all of us who have tuned in today realize the potential of AI, and all of us are keen on bringing AI in some way or another into our learning and assessment practices in our own organizations. Now, as an organization, from our experience, at Excelsoft, working with other organizations globally, as an organization, generally you could do it in 2 ways, right? So one, you can go all in, reimagine your entire learning and assessment model, keeping AI at the center, bring in AI into your systems in a loud and disruptive way. While that's great, it can also disturb your existing processes, many a times confuse your staff, annoy your learners and test takers, thereby putting your brand at risk. A second approach, that has worked well for us is to do it in a subtle, incremental way by bringing in small little improvements using AI at various stages in your learning and assessment life cycle. Right. So we have seen success with this second approach over the past 2 years. We have been working with many organizations, helping them build these small little solutions and apps. So what we did was we created a suite of services and solutions that focus on the application of AI, to bring about subtle, incremental, but very effective improvements to the overall learning and assessment processes of our customers. So we have come up with a suite of AI-powered micro apps and services that can be plugged into your existing learning, assessment, proctoring systems, helping you solve one problem at a time. Right? It's essentially a buffet of apps and services that you can pick and choose from, and then integrate whatever you like into your systems, improve the overall efficiency, effectiveness, and experience of your systems with minimal or no impact to your ongoing business processes.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, we just lost Steve there. He's just dropped off. He's come back. There we go.
Whoa,
You're back, Steve. You briefly left us there. No, excellent. Thank you. So I suppose we've been talking about having a goal, having teams, having dedicated people working within it, working within the kind of ethical structure within your organization, making sure that people are talking, having transparent conversations about it. Looking at the broad suite. You're kind of talking there, Adarsh, about kind of looking at I suppose the job. And I think this is why everyone's been kind of worried about jobs in the future, isn't it? Will jobs be at risk? Well, jobs might be at risk, but jobs are a series of tasks. So AI kind of has the potential to kind of help and augment and add to quality aspects throughout it. So there's kind of lots of little kind of opportunities, really, I suppose, within the organization. Steve, is there anything you want to kind of follow up on that in terms of, I suppose, your kind of vision for the future, but also, any kind of advice that you could leave with people right now as to how they could embrace this?
I mean, I should imagine that a lot of people on the call are already doing it. So, I wouldn't presume that we were the only people playing with these tools. The vision for me is, how do we democratize really good learning? I think assessment as a means to drive learning is really powerful. And I obviously work for an exam board, but the fact is we produce the curriculum based upon subject criteria, and we produce the endpoint assessments, but there's a whole piece in the middle that teachers and learners have to engage with, and that's the process of learning. That's the process of identifying misconceptions and improving knowledge and skill. And I think the construct of, having come from an educational publishing background as well, content is close to my heart. And one of the things that we've strived for years and years since technology became more mainstream is personalization. And I think we've hardly touched the sides of personalized learning. And that's because of the overhead of linking everything together. Traditionally, you'd write an algorithm, you'd tag everything up, you'd have to make all the connections, and then you'd have to try and anticipate what learning pathways look like for specific kids, and that's really tricky. You've got such a broad spectrum. And I think those false distinctions, in a way, will be broken down over time. I'm a great lover of books. I love textbooks, but I can see a situation where it's actually about high quality content and assessment produced still by humans with some assistive Gen AI, I think, to generate stuff. QA'd partly by AI, but by humans as well, bringing subject matter expertise to it. But where the heavy lifting could be taken is at the kind of technology layer, where you're feeding this really high quality data. And funnily enough, none of us have talked about data at all. And I think if you've got really, really good data and you can make it secure, you can train these models to do some pretty powerful things. So if I can close the gap between learning, assisting teachers, democratizing access to services that help students identify their misconceptions, tackle those misconceptions, improve their learning, and do it in the absence of a teacher, i.e. those people who can't either afford to have that or live in societies where teachers are scarce. And I'd put the UK in that bucket for some subjects. Then we're beginning to really start to realize the potential of all of this. But I think we're some way off that. but the ingredients are all there. We just have to keep refining the models. And I'm quite bullish about the potential for all of this. It's just you've got to be prepared to keep going back to that ethical framework and those standards of quality to make sure that what you're doing is not to the detriment of the teacher and the learner, but actually to the advantage of them. And I think overall, if we do it well, then we could improve outcomes for a lot of people. But it's going to take a bit of time, in my view.
Excellent, excellent. And Graham, just any kind of parting thoughts from yourself, just in terms of leadership, anything you kind of think you could add to how people can take it forward?
Thanks. And I guess my key interest at the moment it obviously is related to assessment, but I do have a key interest about how businesses are engaging and using AI. And there is an interesting report that if you look on LinkedIn, Microsoft and LinkedIn did recently in surveys 30,000 employees and what impact they felt AI was having on business. And what is clear is that 3/4 of employees are actually using it, whether employers want them to or not. They're actually using it. And can you believe that 83% of boomers, in which I am a category, are using AI? And I've found a new term, which is bring your own AI, BYOAI. So people are doing that at work now. They're bringing their own AI. So, business leaders are going to have to embrace that. And the things that Adarsh said about, making change and incremental change are important. And, find a way of actually starting to make that incremental change in the business. Engage from both ends, management and, employees, and bring that training in. And the last thing that I would say is that if you read through the report, it emphasizes the importance of what we call human-related skills, of which critical thinking is a key one, and is going to be central to dealing with the skills gap that is emerging between now and the end of this decade.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. And you've had a vote of confidence from Paul there, just about AI is not a strategy. It's quite interesting to read some of these comments. I'm sorry, guys, we haven't been able to get to all this as ever with these things. You kind of unpick something, and there's a whole wash of things. And Graham, I think, your comments about MPs and PMs, quite timely.
I love that.
But thank you very much. And I suppose the next time to really have this long in-depth conversation is anyone who's attending the EAA's conference next week in London. That's going to be a great opportunity, and I hope to have more of these conversations and discussions going forward with everyone here. So thank you to all my guests. Thank you for everyone that's turned up. I've had a great turnout for this first webinar from the Test Community Network. I really appreciate your input, and stay connected and stay subscribing to the Test Community Network for more information and more updates. So thank you to my guests. Thank you to everyone listening, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Bye-bye.